to Me, Danny and Michael Philippines.
Talk to Me is Danny and Michael Philippines' directorial debut. The brothers previously won an Oscar for Best Online Video Series in 2017 for their popular YouTube channel, Adelaide, which has over 6 million views.
Oh shit, fuck, sorry, I'm gonna... You want to talk for a second? Oh, yeah, I'll talk for a second. Oh shit. Thank you so much. Oh fuck, no, actually, ever since we were kids, well, we've been obsessed with filmmaking ever since we were little kids, and it doesn't always lead to good financial decisions. So, flashback to 2018, we were broke, we moved back home, things were very grim, to say the least, and I'd almost given up creatively, and then Danny and Hinsman wrote a script called Talk to Me, and it was supposed to be a studio film. We had a studio on board, but they wanted to do it different. They didn't want it to be Australian. It didn't feel right to us. We wanted to make it Australian. So thank God, Causeway Films, we love you guys so much. Amazing cast. Love you.
Okay, bit more story. I got through the rain and I got to Adelaide. And I went to see, this is 1960, the end of 1965, I think. I went to see Laurie and Joe Spezzano. Laurie now had the use of his dad's car, and he was now the boyfriend of a hooker. And I was so jealous. It should have been me. We drove to Hindley Street to pick her up. I was so jealous of his new lifestyle. I'd been better at getting girls than Laurie, and now this very nice hooker seemed to love him. It wasn't fair. Well, now he had a life of his own, so we drifted apart and I never saw him again. In 2000, I wrote to him from Sydney, but his sister told me that he disappeared mysteriously in 1975. They filed a missing person report, but to no avail. I was now 21 almost, and I worked in a shoe store and a few factories. Then in early 66, I think it was, I left Adelaide forever. I got a ride from a truckie along the Western Highway to Dimboola in Victoria. We said goodbye, and at 6 p.m. I walked out of town. The sun was setting and a truck drove past and a bloke yelled, "Long-haired poofter," and threw a bottle at me. So I gave him the finger. The truck skidded to a stop. They'd back up and beat the shit out of me, so I looked for a bush to hide in, but the road was so narrow. There was swamp on either side. It looked deep, and I ran, hoping to find a hiding place. The truck wasn't following, so I slowed to peer up the road, hoping I'd not see him. And then a shot rang out. And a bullet. I heard a bullet zing somewhere nearby. I ran another 100 metres and then I listened and I heard someone say, "Can you see him?" And another one yelled, "Get the bugger." Now, for all I know, they could have been shooting at some bush animal. I could have been there by accident. Anyway, I hid and hoped they'd get sick of shooting and looking. And then the sun had gone, but in the moonlight I saw the road's dotted line and a large tree on mossy ground to my right. So I waded across, my shoes filled with swamp gunk, but now I had an island refuge. I squatted behind a tree. Torchlight shone on my right, so I hunched down and another shot sounded out. And then someone yelled, "That's enough, let's go." I'd stayed still for 10 minutes and one by one, the creatures of the swamp began to chirp and croak and call. I got back on a road and followed the white line in the moonlight. An hour later I got a lift and I was very happy. Those blokes were probably hunting wombats. Maybe those shots was them having fun with the long-haired poofter. In Sydney I got a job pushing barrows of cement along a narrow plank and tipping it into a hole. There was another worker there with long black hair, blowing in the wind. He wore a clean long-sleeved shirt, unbuttoned, and the breeze billowed it out. His whole being seemed to proclaim, "Here works a free soul who is strong, wild and untamed." At lunchtime I saw him relaxing on the ground, so I flopped down nearby. "Hi, man," he said. In his hand was a thick sandwich. My stomach remembered what it must be like to eat. He reached and offered me a newspaper-wrapped bundle from a bag he had. Inside was a big, thick sandwich. He said, "Have one. You can't do hard yakka on an empty stomach." He smiled, with no teeth missing, because I had two missing at the front by then. That was a bit of a handicap in romance. But, I figured I'd work around it. Not romance with this guy. No, I wasn't after romance with him. Anyway, he said, "I'm Alex. I like your taste in clothes." And he gestured out my blue jeans and white shirt. We were the only ones on the job not wearing shorts. After work, we rode the train to Erskineville, a Sydney suburb, and he invited me to stay at the house that he shared with university students. "You can pay rent when you get your pay," he said. His housemates were two snooty girls and a guy that didn't seem happy to see me. We went to a party at the University of New South Wales, and I was out of place with the booze in art students. I left when I realised that none of the girls anywhere there were interested in me. And a week later, after work, Alex said, "Get dolled up, we're off to the theatre. It costs 5 cents to get in, because they ask at the door for a silver coin donation, and 5 cents is silver." Totally ignorant of live theatre. I thought the set was very tactile, but the acting seemed amateurish compared to a movie. We were in the Genesian Theatre in Kent Street, and 32 years later I appeared there a couple of times. Once in Taming of the Shrew, and anyway, I fell off the stage head first once, but it was while dragging Petruccio's boots off his feet. So I slid head first along the stage and zoomed into space, and I landed on my head, but the front seats were empty. The audience loved it, and the director, Helen Robinson, said, "Do it like that every night." Travelling in the 6 a.m. darkness out to my suburban worksite in those dusty old 1966 Sydney carriages was fun. Adelaide trains never ventured underground. In Sydney, workers got on in drab clothes and they snatched sleep in the time it took to reach their job. Were they yogis trained to conjure slumber in short spurts? Did they, like me, ever miss their station and wake up at Lions Inn and take the day off and rejoice in the freedom? Peter Sellers' LP, Songs for Swinging Sellers, now enters the scene. Now, Alex, the guy that gave me a place to stay, he loved BBC radio comedy, and he was a goon show fanatic, and he'd imitate Eccles, "Oh, Nettie Seagoon," and he had tapes of every broadcast. But after 2 weeks, I was sick to death of it and saturated by the overkill. We collected our fortnightly pay, and we all decided, the four of us, to go to the movies. We chose to see English pop star Adam Faith in a comedy about a fake Loch Ness monster. It was called What a Whopper. Now, I'm not sure if someone slipped me a drug for fun or to see if it would bring me out of my shell, but I felt that movie with all my senses. Never had I been so aware of the visuals, the soundtrack, the subtleties, and the deep meanings within the film. After interval came Peter Lorre and Vincent Price in the horror movie send-up The Raven. The colour was mind-blowing, intense. I wondered why the producer hadn't featured the new colour technique in the publicity. I don't know I reckon they slipped me an LSD trip, but it wasn't very strong because after we returned home, I realised that I'd had enough of this goon show house. Silently, I packed my little bag, and without having paid the rent owed, I snuck out of their life. At Erskineville Station, a thin young Aboriginal girl with a limp invited me to sleep on her couch after we began talking for a while, and after I'd given her a sob story, on the condition that I bought groceries. I stayed for 4 days, and then a boyfriend came to visit and made it clear I was no longer a guest, and I never saw her again. I still had not met any beatniks. Hanging around King's Cross hoping to run into some was getting me nowhere. My money ran out, but some automobiles in used car lots weren't locked at night, so I began sleeping in them. I thought about prostituting myself, but I was worried the guy might refuse to pay. Besides, I did not want to cop it up the arse. Worse still, I might get beaten up. One day at Central Railway, I'd been waiting at the interstate platform, hoping to befriend some lonesome girl. It happens in movies, so it can be done, right? A lady came up and said, "You look hungry. Please take this." She handed me a $10 note. I had an ice cream sundae at Woolworth's old cafeteria and then went to the 10:15 session at the Lyric Cinema in George Street, and then to the Mayfair 4:30 matinee, staying until I'd seen both movies twice. In the old days, they let you see films twice. You could open the toilet door of the Civic Theatre from the alley, and once inside, you walked out the other toilet door into the cinema stalls. Some theatre toilets opened onto an alley, and patrons unlocked them to have a cigarette. The door would be unlocked until staff noticed it. On leaving the theatre, the usherette, as theatre policy, would often give you a pass-out ticket. But they were the good old days when you could sit all day in a cinema. I entered the ladies' parlour of the Capitol Hotel. Pubs had them so boozing ladies could not disturb boozing public bar males. Pubs closed at 10 p.m. In Sydney, so at 9:50 people pushed and shoved and yelled orders to barmaids, and you could pick up discarded drinks if you were the last to exit. I was not an alcoholic, but I liked anything for free. Most bums picked up butts and kept them in tobacco tins. There were no plastic pouches back then, only tins or paper wallets. I smoked, but if I had to go without, it didn't bother me too much. I took pride in being free of addictions for a while. 2 men, aged about 30, said that they were new in town and did I know a cheap rooming house. So I told them about South Dowling Street. "If we get a taxi, could you show us? We'll pay you for your time." "Okay, man," I said. We got to the rooming house and one guy, Alex, went inside. The other bloke, John, and I waited in silence. I wondered how much I'd be paid and what was going on that night at King's Cross Midnight Movie Theatre. Alex came out and said, "No rooms vacant." I decided to leave, but they hailed another cab and escorted me towards it. I spun to break their hold and took off running. One of them called, "Hey, come back, what's the matter?" Once out of sight, I headed to the cross. I figured they might be serial killers. After a nap in the back of an abandoned car, I thought I'd probably imagined the worst. A week passed and I was in the Roughest Guts cafe called the Hasty Tasty. It was a greasy spoon cafe right at the top of William Street. It was crowded with real King's Cross characters. The jukebox finished playing Sugar Shack and launched into Washington Square when those pair of guys walked in. After some embarrassment, we joked about how paranoid I'd been. They bought me a meal at the Piccadilly Hotel and fed the jukebox. I chose Midnight in Moscow and Let Me In by the Sensations. We played pool and we drank spirits and we got drunk, and a cab whisked us across the harbour to a block at Kirribilli Flats. Despite the $1 million view, inside the joint was shabby. They sat me in a worn-out lounge and gave me a beer that I didn't want. John said, "It'll help you relax. We like people relaxed." They were fairly well built. I'd been locked up with enough tough bastards to recognise drama. John was at the door and Alex was on the arm of my chair. "Take your pants off," he said. "We got a new pair for you." "Oh, I'm happy with the ones I got on, thanks." I managed to smile. "You know what we want." "I'm going," I said. I got up in the bush and John's arm went around my neck and he threw me to the floor, and I kicked out and connected with his leg, and then he punched me in the face and he said, "Keep still, you little shit, or I'll kill you." I wrestled, but Alex sat on me and John pulled my jeans off. They wouldn't go over my shoes and they hung around my ankles. I was saddened they'd do this to a nice guy like me, and began to shed tears. And John sneered, "It's going to happen, so relax your ass." They tried to enter. I was too tight, so they used lubricant. I hoped they'd give up, but I couldn't handle more violence, so I managed a bit to relax. The thought flashed, I've done my best to resist, so I'd better get it over quick. The pain was intense, but John came quick and Alex took a bit longer. I pulled up my pants and couldn't look him in the face. It's a sobering thought that your bum can be used like that, and there's nothing you could do about it. As I left the flat, one of them said, "If you want beatniks, you should have gone to the Royal George Hotel. That's where they hang out." Outside, I plotted revenge. But if I went to the cops, the cops would laugh or arrest me for vagrancy, and I had no way to get a gun. And that was lucky, because I would have gone back and killed him without a second thought. And then the next 20 years might have been spent in jail with more raping biff artists. Well, I never saw them again, and a day later, I couldn't even remember what they looked like, or the name of that pub they'd told me about. Then things got a whole lot better. Okay, that's it for tonight.
The world watch it and love it and feel like it was relevant to them and exciting to them, and that's why we do what we do, and that's what makes it worth it. So we have to keep doing it because Australian cinema matters, and that's why we're all here. So thank you all, and happy birthday to my husband.